Okay, today is November 26, 2013. I want to pick up with that intake form we were looking at last week. And as I was suggesting rather emphatically last week, your interview begins before you ever set foot in the interview room. It begins by gathering information about this child's relationship with the accused, about this child's abilities and vulnerabilities. The interview begins before you ever go into the interview room, and you must be totally prepared if you really want to get the most information and the highest quality information. And I have emphasized throughout the course that I don't believe in blind interviews, I believe in informed interviews. And what we're looking at here is an intake form. And to the best of our ability, we're trying to learn about this kid on, in the most economical way. And typically that happens by bringing in the child's caregiver, the non-offending caregiver as we call them, and asking them questions. Sometimes it's the mom, sometimes it's the aunt, sometimes it's the foster mom. Whoever it may be, you want to get as much information about this kid and this case and this accused as you can. And one of the things that we learned when we were going over the intake form last week was that this family has been to your interview center at least once in the past. Well, what was the visit about the last time the family was at the child interview center? Someone tell me that, please. Why was the family here once before? The sister. And what happened to the sister? The sister made a disclosure that she was molested, and they went to the center. She told her story, and what happened to that case? It was closed. It was dismissed. And tell me why that's important. Does that help us figure out anything about the interview with the different sister? Why did we give a damn about the first sister if we're interviewing a different sister?
It shows that there was a history, that they were there before.
It shows that there was a history, but why is that relevant to you, the forensic interviewer? That give you any insight into what your interview with this sister is going to be like?
You have to be more careful.
We have to be more careful. What makes you say that?
Whatever threat it was that caused the first child to retract her statement could affect the second interview.
Okay, I'm not so sure.
Or I'm sorry.
Yeah, that case was closed because the lawyers thought that they couldn't prove the case. There wasn't enough good evidence, right? So now you're interviewing her sister who has made a disclosure. That was the other sister in the past whose case never got prosecuted. And you have to be careful with your questioning. How might that impact this sister, your kid, your interviewee's willingness to talk to you? Come on, guys. This is not that challenging here.
It feels it.
Why might this kid be less likely to talk to you than a kid who didn't have a sister who came to the interview center? Hester says this kid knows that when her sister came forward, nothing happened, right?
Well, she thinks that she might think you won't believe her.
She might think that she won't be believed. Why? What about her sister's case might cause her? You're on the right track. I'll get to you. What about her sister's case might make this child think that she won't be believed, the new kid?
Because nothing was done.
For who?
For the sister.
For the sister. So she knows her sister came here and told her story, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. Go ahead.
But he spent the day in jail.
Well, that's another factor there. Not only did nothing happen, Dad spent the day in jail, right? So among the outcomes that the new sister might anticipate is that what's going to happen? Dad's going to go back to jail or go to jail. And most of the time, not always, most of the time in an intrafamilial case, the kid doesn't want Dad to go to jail. They simply want what? What do you think they may want? The abuse to stop. Very good. But if they think that the guy's going to go to jail, and that's not among the outcomes that they're interested in, they may be less likely to be open with you, right? You would want to know that. And was the first case dropped because they didn't believe the sister? from what you can guess and what you know about law enforcement and child advocacy? Was the first case dropped because they didn't believe the girl? Is there any evidence of that?
No, it just says insufficient evidence, but the
Yeah.
child will know that. The second child will know. The child will believe that they didn't believe her.
Precisely. Very good. And that's the kind of thinking you got to do, right? The child, we all know the case was dropped due to insufficient evidence. They don't get that. That has no meaning to them. What do you mean? If you said to her, we dropped the case because it was insufficient evidence. What do you mean? My sister told you what happened. That's not enough. You don't believe her? No, we believe her, but we have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury, and there's not enough. There's no corroboration. My sister said what happened. You know, kids are very black and white, concrete, right? So she knows that when her sister went there, never mind what the truth is, she knows that when her sister went there and told what happened, she wasn't believed. What if they don't believe me? My sister's smarter than me, taller than me, stronger than me. If they didn't believe her, how are they going to believe me? Go ahead.
What are the chances that the father ramped up his threats after the first?
Well, that's a possibility. We're reading into that, but we don't know.
Asking.
Well, I don't know what the chances are that he may. That's certainly something that might have happened. The father may have. We need to interview the other sister to find out what he did or didn't do. But father, knowing that the first girl told, may have tried. He might have tried even harder with this child to prevent her from telling. There might have been many. We saw a couple of secrecy discussions. He might have had those very kind of secrecy discussions that he initiated. He might have had repeated secrecy discussions with her and made sure she knew it was very important. You're never going to say bad things about me. You're never going to tell on me. This is just between us. People wouldn't understand. Okay? They wouldn't get it. People are jealous. Who knows? But he may have ramped up his attempts to get her not to tell. So that's something that, we certainly need to be mindful of. And when you get that kind of outcome with the first case, and that case has a number 98 on it, so that suggests it was a while ago, it also may have led to the perpetrator feeling untouchable. He beat the wheel the first time, I can beat it again. For some reason, he felt emboldened to do this again. It appears. Again, we're drawing inferences. Nothing wrong with drawing inferences. That's what investigative work is all about. Okay? Looking at facts and drawing reasonable inferences. Okay? And engaging in investigative strategies based upon those inferences. Sometimes our inferences are correct. Sometimes our inferences are not correct. But we couldn't investigate anything if we didn't draw inferences about evidence. Okay? So, we're drawing these inferences before we walk in the interview room. We're trying to figure out who is this kid, and how is she, how likely is she to express herself about what happened in the past. And we begin to make those kind of judgments. What does the ethnic background appear to be of the principals in this case, the people involved? They appear perhaps to be Asian, right? They are Asian. It injects it creates a potential cultural issue here. Now, I don't know if they are Asian, probably are Asian. I don't know what part of Asia they're from. Someone from China doesn't have the same cultural beliefs as somebody from the Philippines or someone from Japan, or someone from Cambodia or wherever, okay? So it would be nice to know, maybe this is in Fort Lee, up in Fort Lee, New Jersey, there's a significant Asian population. We ought to know about these Asians. Why did these Asians come and why did this family come? And more importantly, if they are South Korean, how do South Koreans feel about sexual abuse, human sexuality, those kinds of things, Is there an enhanced shame that's this child may feel in her cultural context? I don't know. It'd be nice to know. if we did. And that's something we could learn about just through our multidisciplinary team. You know, if we did the things that we talked about a couple of weeks ago about learning about the cultures in our community. Now, she has difficulty reading. We draw some inferences about where the perpetrator was. And we also, by looking at this, we also learn that the child is on Broad Street in Trenton at her father's parents' home. Now, we begin to think that, hey, they may be biased. They may not be looking out for this kid's interests. And that's something to think about, certainly. Something else to think about is she ain't in her house with her mom and her siblings. Or at least it appears that way, right? So you want to know that. You're gathering this baseline information, and we need to figure out whether she was removed. You know, and we talked about the fact that a kid makes a disclosure. A kid attempts to right a wrong, and when they attempt to right a wrong, they're delivered somewhere, and the perpetrator is not. So the message that they get is somehow they did something bad or wrong, or they're being punished. And again, that's going to impact on her willingness to communicate what happened to you in the past. You're going to get questions like, am I in trouble? Or maybe they won't say it, but they will be cagey about answering your questions. Or they may be reluctant to answer your questions. And, you know, we'll talk about ways to deal with that. But what we sometimes say is, listen, if they even ask that, you're not in any trouble with me. You didn't do anything wrong. Is that something you're feeling? What makes you think you're in trouble? You know, you can explore a child's emotions during a forensic interview. And whenever they say something like that, my advice is to put it back on the child. No matter what they ask. Am I still a virgin in God's eyes? That's one of Victor Veit's examples in one of your readings. Am I still a virgin? Man, how do you answer that question? Is Dad going to go to jail? How do you answer that question? Okay? Am I going to get a disease? Can people tell? Am I able to have babies? You know, are people going to call me a whore? How do you answer those questions? What I suggest is say, what makes you ask that? Is that something that's worrying you? What makes you worry about that? Put in that. Because the boys in the playground said that. Because my mom did this. Because at church they said that. Okay? And then you say, listen, I don't know how other people are going to think about what happened here, but I just know that it's okay and you didn't do anything wrong. Okay? And I want to try to help you so that this doesn't happen again. And I can't do that unless I know what happened. But you didn't do anything wrong. And it's okay. I talk to lots of kids. Sometimes kids think that they're in trouble or that they did something wrong. How are you feeling? And that's what we call a personal statement. We'll talk more about that when I get into the protocol in detail next week. But it does a few things. It universalizes the emotion. You know, it doesn't hit him over the head and say, you're not alone. Other kids have been molested. And you say, I talk to lots of kids. Sometimes kids think they're in trouble, or sometimes kids think they did something wrong, but they didn't. But they feel that way. How are you feeling? Well, I don't know. My mother said this. My brother said that. The kids at school said this. You know, you can start to get into their emotions and what's creating a chilling effect. Okay? Well, when I told the teacher, they made me go live with Mima and Peepa, and I never go to Mima and Peepas. My mommy don't even like them. You know, say, well, you know, we just want to make sure you're safe for a couple of days, and if we know what happened, then we can try to think about going home again. I mean, you're never going to be able to completely finesse your way around the foster parent issue or foster situation of the child, but at least you can address it head on. And tell the child, the more I know about what happened, the more we can, you know, more likely it is we can go back to the way things were. Never make a promise to the child. Ever. Because you can't keep those promises. As long as I know what happened, this will not happen again. That's not true. That's not true. Look, it happened 2 times in this very household. How can you can't promise this kid that? Because her sister was molested, the same group of people came in her life, and then she got molested. But even if it wasn't this fact scenario, you never make a promise because you are powerless to keep that. Whatever the promise is, you're powerless to keep that promise. Who is the, here on the bottom here, who's the suspect and what is their relationship? Well, here it's the biological father. Okay? Now, whoever it is, it says here, what is the relationship to the child? And we don't mean, when we ask for relationship to the child in the intake form, in the information gathering phase, we don't mean a familial relationship always. It could be. In this case, it is familial. But it could be the school security guard. The answer to that question is just, what's the connection between the child and the perpetrator, the accused? The answer to that could be school crossing guard, gym teacher, pastor, could be group home coordinator. Anybody, could be a neighbor, could be anybody in any situation, karate teacher, something like that. In this case, it's the father. And the reason we want to know that is because the relationship between the child and the perpetrator can give us insight into whether that child's going to disclose, is going to be someone who gives us a narrative and tells us their story the best they can. What about the relationship is important? Why do we care about the relationship? Why is there a connection between their relationship with the perpetrator and the likelihood that they're going to tell us a lot of stuff, a lot of information?
There's a bond. It's like the father said, they're not going to want to tell on their father, because the father might go to jail and they don't want that. They'll want to protect the father, even if the father is a molester. Precisely.
The answer was there's a bond, and how significant that bond is will give us some insight into whether that's going to have a chilling effect on whether the child informs or tells on or gives us the story of what happened to her. So what we're doing there is, in this intake process, we're exploring potential issues of loyalty. Loyalty. The more pronounced the loyalty is between the child and the accused, the child and the alleged perpetrator, the more impact that relationship, that intimacy could have on the child's willingness to disclose. If the answer to that was, he's the carnival attendant, at the Woodland Park Carnival, well, that's not a significant relationship. We're not going to have any issues of loyalty there because she doesn't know the guy. One of the scenarios we have in the Finding Words project is an 8-year-old girl is invited to go see the sheep. They had a petting zoo, and the guy who ran the petting zoo invited her to where they keep the other animals in the back of the carnival there, and showed her some of the other animals on a private tour, we'll call it, and he fondled her back there. So when we look at the relationship there was no family relationship there. The connection between the child and the perpetrator was he was an employee at the carnival that she attended. So in that case, we didn't have to worry too much about loyalty getting in the way. There may be other challenges with that kid in that case, but one of them is probably not going to be loyalty. She don't give a damn whether the carny gets in trouble or not. I think we can infer that reasonably. But the more significant the relationship, the more difficult, the more challenging the interview is going to be. And that's something you ought to know before you go in there, so you can be prepared to deal with it. How long has the suspect known the child? You might say, well, it's her father. That's a silly question. It's not a silly question if you think about it. We have had more than one case where the father, lives in America and his family lives in some other country. And he came here to make money. He sends money home to his wife and children. His wife may have been pregnant the last time that he left whatever country and came to live in America. And then the child came to the U.S. and moved in with him, and he was in a call for mom and the siblings eventually, and she's living alone with dad or living with the siblings and dad, but mom's still in the other country. So he only knows the daughter for 2 months, even though she's 9. You go, it's his father. How could he know her for 2 months? Because he does. He only knows her for 2 months. Now he knows of her. He may have made a few visits, but don't simply assume that because the person is the parent, that their relationship is one that's been since birth. That's not always the case. There's more than a few cases that fit the scenario I just described. What is the suspect's access to the child? Okay. Mother works 11 to 9. Father's temporarily disabled. Is there access and opportunity in this household? I think so, right? Most of the night into the early morning, mom's not in the house. And dad doesn't look like he works, so he's always in the house. So he's probably assumed the primary caregiving function. And he certainly, if those are her hours and she works them regularly, he certainly has opportunity and access, especially in the wee hours of the morning when these things are more likely to occur. So simply by gathering background information, you're beginning to develop evidence. And evidence is not a word that only applies to law enforcement, okay? It applies to the Department of Child Protection too, right? It applies to DCP&P, DIFUS, it applies to child protection. You know, the intake workers in child protection and DCP&P, they need to be able to prove their case in order for them to get services, in order for them to intervene within the family. Now, sometimes they have cases that they characterize as child welfare. But, you know, if it's a molest case or a serious physical abuse case, that, you know, the parents may not want to do what DIFUS says they got to do. Well, you have to prove that there was abuse and neglect. Now, the standard of proof is quite different in child protection. It's what we call preponderance of the evidence. You know, you only have to prove it by, let's say, 51%. And in criminal law, you got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But either way, you need to show that something happened. When you watch Gone Baby Gone, if we want child protection to intervene in that woman's life, we have to show there was neglect. And the way that you're going to show that there was neglect is to develop evidence. Evidence is not a dirty word and it's not a police word. It's an investigative word. And it applies equally to child protection, law enforcement, and anybody else who wants to prove that something happened in the past. And we're beginning to find evidence right now. That thing I highlighted up there is a piece of evidence. Information can be evidence. The information here is that mom's not around. I would send my detectives out to go interview her employer. I would find out if she works from 11 to 9. I would get the records that shows that on a daily basis she is not in the home. Okay, you can take our word for it, but corroboration, when you're investigating for prosecution in the criminal courts, you want to develop as much evidence as you can. But we got a great start here. And I don't believe that this is going to be untrue. The accused and his wife and the people who give that information are not paying attention to why that's relevant to us, but that is of supreme relevance to us who are investigating what happened. So in this intake, you're gathering information in preparation for the interview of the child. And you're learning about, in this particular question, about access and opportunity. And that will help you when you're talking to that child about what may or may not have happened. Let me read the disclosure facts. Now, the disclosure is, you know, where did it come from? How did this case get to child protection and law enforcement? All right? At 2:15 in the afternoon, the alleged victim told Jen Glover, an 8-year-old classmate at school number 24, that her father's pee-pee smells funny. Jen asked how she knows this. The alleged victim said that dad lets her play with it when mom is working. Jen told Mrs. O'Connor, who spoke briefly to the victim, who denied discussing the matter with Jen. The victim was then brought to the principal's office. Principal Guerreri did not speak to the child but called child protection. The accused was not scheduled to come back to the family home until this afternoon. DIFUS, CPS, did not respond the day that the child said this to Jen, and instead set up an appointment. Killington Police, the prosecutor's detective, and the mother came to the Child Advocacy Center. The mother was informed of the allegations last night and brought the child to Trenton because Child Protection told her that the father and child would not be able to have contact when he gets home from the hospital. Now, I didn't see anywhere in here where it said he was in a hospital for some reason.
And that's what he was disabled.
So that's something we'd have to follow up on, but from whoever wrote this, we can assume that he's in the hospital and he didn't get out yet. And it says something about he's not getting home until later today or later this afternoon. So now we know a little bit more about why she's at Grandma and Grandpa's in Trenton, right? Now, a couple things I'm learning from this, and you're learning too. What inferences can we draw from the last paragraph about Mom's level of support? They may not be valid, but they get us thinking, right? Mom learns that her husband may have sexually abused her daughter, right? We know that. Child Protection says he can't be around your daughter. So what does she do? Takes the child and drives her to South Central New Jersey and leaves her with grandparents. What might another mom have done?
Kicked him to the curb.
Kick him the hell out, right? That's one option.
Change the lock.
You don't even have to be mean-spirited about it. You don't even have to believe your daughter. You could be skeptical of your daughter. You could still tell him, "Hun, you got to go to a hotel for a couple of days. This is effed up. I don't know what's going on here, but they don't want you around the child." She doesn't do any of that. She takes her daughter and drives her to Trenton.
And leaves her with the other two daughters.
And, good observation, and leaves him in a house with the other two children, one of whom made a prior disclosure of sexual abuse. Now, let's not, I'm saying, I'm drawing inferences here about Mom's competence to deal with this situation. Now, her lack of competence, and I'm beginning to get the feeling, again, I need to peel away the layers here, we need to investigate this thing, but I'm getting the sense that she's not competent, that she's doing the wrong things for protection of her daughter, finding out the truth, protection of her other kids. Now, that may arise from her supporting the perpetrator, or a lot of other places this could come from, right? She may be supporting the perpetrator and not believe her daughters and think he's the greatest guy in the world. That may be one emotion that is influencing this behavior. What other things might be happening? Yeah, she might be under the control of this guy. Maybe he's a batterer. You know, maybe he exercises supreme control over her and the family. And this is her only way of dealing with this without angering him. Don't want to anger him. She needs to demonstrate that he's on his side. She fears him. I don't know what's going on in his family. But I'm troubled by Mom driving her daughter to South Central New Jersey when there's an accusation against her husband, instead of getting him the hell out of there, even if she believes him for a day or two. So that's something we want to follow up on a little bit. From an investigative standpoint, right, there's a place. The scene of the crime here is Mom's house. She lives there. So we need to follow up on the social dynamics of this family. And I would go get the old what? The prior what? What would I want? The file from what?
The statement of the sister.
Yeah, I want to get the sister's file too and read that, obviously. It's not so obvious. I'm teaching you guys. Go get the old file. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if this was the second accusation against the second person, did Killington Police Department go to him in the hospital saying, "Guess what, buddy, you're not going back to your house because we found something else out"?
Well, we didn't interview the child yet, so,
Okay.
you know, you can't start bullying him. What else? Now, we learned here that the child was taken by her mother. We speculated before that maybe Child Protection told the mother, and Child Protection took her there, or somehow Child Protection had a direct hand in bringing the child to Trenton, set up this foster placement. It looks like Child Protection simply said, Dad can't be around the child until we say so. And she's the one who took this action. She's the one who implemented a strategy for keeping Dad away from her daughter. She's the one who drove her daughter to Trenton. So what's the message to the child? Among many inferences we can draw, but one inference, perhaps the best inference we can draw, is that the child thinks what? About her mother.
Mother doesn't love her.
Her mother doesn't forget about love her, believe her. Her mother doesn't believe her. Her mother takes her and puts her in some other place. Who knows? I'd love to know what that conversation was like on the ride to Trenton. Go ahead.
Also the fact that the teacher had confronted her and she denied it. So she's got two of those things.
Yes. So my next question was going to be, what else about the disclosure process is going to suggest to you that this is going to be a tough interview? Number one, we're saying, hey, you know, her sister wasn't believed, and her sister made a disclosure, and her dad wound up in jail. We also know now this is going to be a tough interview. This kid's probably not going to want to talk to us because her mother doesn't believe her. The child thinks her mother doesn't believe her because the mother took her to Trenton to get her out of the area because of something her father did, of which she's blameless for. But even more directly, there's more information in that referral. And that is when the principal asks her about what happened, when the teacher asks her about what happened, does she deny it happened? What does she say? What does she deny?
She denied that there was a conversation.
She denies even talking to Jen about this, as if Jen made it up for the whole cloth, which is good, actually, because that suggests that this is a denial, that this is something that she's trying to avoid. This is a rewrite of history here. For her to say, yeah, I talked to Jen, but that's not what I said. I said I had a dream about it, or I was afraid he might do that because of what he said to my sister. There were a number of things that she could say that would be plausible, that would allow her to kind of wiggle out of her disclosure. But she doesn't say any of that. She says, I never talked to Jen. It never happened. And that tells me as an experienced investigator that this did happen and that she did talk to Jen about it. Because there's no reason for an 8-year-old to come up with this. None in the world. Okay? Is that an accidental or purposeful disclosure?
Accidental.
Everyone agree? I agree. It's accidental. Did she reach out to an authority? The one authority figure who walked in the room, she ran the other way, right? Metaphorically. The one authority figure that walked in the room, she said she never even talked to Jen. So this is clearly an accidental disclosure. How old is the alleged victim? 7.
Well, it says there's a 7-year-old twin sister.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So that would make her 7, right?
My assumption.
So, before we go in the interview room, let's reevaluate what our challenges are. We have to deal with the residual of her twin sister's prior disclosure, the perception that no one believed her sister, and her belief that Dad may go to jail if she tells, all arising out of her sister's experience. So we've got to be mindful of that. We also have to be mindful of the fact that she may not want to tell us what happened because she doesn't want to hurt her mother, and her mother doesn't believe her, and if her mother doesn't believe her, she won't be supported, and she'll wind up just like her sister. We also have to be mindful of the fact that, well, the child has difficulty reading. I don't think that's going to be an impediment to disclosure. We also have to be mindful of the fact that she repudiated what she said to Jen, right, almost immediately after the disclosure. So we have to be mindful of the fact that this kid is not going to want to talk to us. There's also the accidental nature of the disclosure communicates to us that she's probably not going to want to talk about this. Her relationship with the perpetrator is one of supreme intimacy. It's her father. That's going to create difficulty in her telling us about what happened because she doesn't want to see him get in trouble. So all of the familial issues are going to impact on our ability to interview this child. And we're going to have to be prepared to deal with that and tell her that she's not in any trouble, she didn't do anything wrong. You know, not everybody goes to jail. If she ever asks about is dad going to go to jail or that issue comes up again, you know, you may have to say to her, listen, I don't know what's going to happen to dad, but not everybody goes to jail. Some people go to jail, some people don't go to jail, some people get help. But I just want to make sure you're okay. You're going to have to deal with those issues in that child's mind. You know what they're going to be now. If you just walked in that interview room without doing this thing here, without going through this process, and she clammed up or started talking to you and then shut down or changed the subject, you wouldn't know why. Or you'd speculate about why. Now you have an advantage here. You know what's on her mind. She's only 7. Her analysis of, her thinking about what happened to her and this process of disclosure is not that sophisticated. You know, I think we figured out what's on her mind. So we need to kind of address that when she doesn't want to talk to us about it to the best of our ability. Go ahead.
Now, since the child is close to her friend, would the police also interview the friend or inform the parents that, you know, the child was disclosed to? Because what if the child says, oh my God, mommy, daddy, you won't believe what so-and-so told me in class today?
Yes, absolutely. We call that person a fresh complaint witness. Okay? Did we talk about that last week? Fresh complaint? Yeah. Jen Glover is the fresh complaint. Okay? Now, she didn't go to Jen because she wanted, you know, let's not mix up accidental and purposeful disclosure with fresh complaint. Jen is a person that she told the abuse to that led to the investigation. And you want to talk to her. You want to talk to as many people as you can that the victim may have disclosed to. Excuse me. But among the most important witnesses is the fresh complaint. And generally speaking, that's the person that the child told outside the investigative process that led to the investigation. You know, who did they tell that led to the, they told the guidance counselor, they told their teacher, they told their therapist, they told their friend Jen. You know, I wanted to bring in I'll bring in the report next week. I had a meeting last week, we had a case, no, this week. 15-year-old, 21-year-old brother molesting her. Started when she was 10. How's this for peculiar? I'll leave you with this peculiar set of facts. What happened in this case. And you can't make this stuff up. Some guy, an uncle, lends his cellular phone to his nephew. For whatever reason, the nephew doesn't able to have a phone. And Uncle Mike will call him, gives it to Joey. Here's the cell phone, use it, okay? Any number that's called that you see pop up, that's for me, don't answer it. If it's some number you recognize as one of your friends, you can answer it or make calls. You can have it this weekend. Somebody calls the cell phone for Joey, the nephew. He don't pick up, leaves a message. At the end of the weekend, Joey gives Uncle Mike the phone back. Uncle Mike sees there's a message. Listens to the message. It's the girl talking about her father molesting her. No, her brother molesting her, and I hope you don't tell anybody, or she makes some statement about the molest. And this Uncle Mike goes, oh my God, what the hell is that? Calls up Joey. That's my girlfriend. What about your girlfriend? Yeah, she says her brother was molesting, blah, blah, blah. That's how the case came out. So that is a peculiar, fresh complaint statement, but we always want to analyze how the information came out, whether it's Jen Glover, the little 8-year-old, or this cockamamie process of the cat getting out of the bag, but we always need to evaluate how the information got out. And from that, we can make decisions about what our interview is going to look like, how this kid feels about the abuse. You know, we're going to ask Jen Glover, how did the subject come up? What was her emotions like? Now, she's only 8, but to the best of our ability, we're going to find out what she said and how she said it. And then we're going to begin to interview the alleged victim in the case. Yeah?
Does it make any difference, or the reason why it's like looked at for being either purposeful or by accident, is there any like because it's, let's say, accidental disclosure, is there any more like sustainability in like what the person disclosed because it was accidental versus like purposeful? Like,
Yeah, no, the whether it was accidental or purposeful does not have any evidentiary meaning, doesn't make it more likely we can prove it or less likely.
Okay.
The reason why we look at that is because we're trying to figure out if this kid is going to be open with us and forthcoming. The kid who goes to the police station is going to be more likely to tell you what happened because they reached out.
And not
The kid who told Jen Glover and then denies it to the first teacher who walks along is going to be a tough interview. And that's what we want to do. Anyway, I'll see you here next week, right?
Thank you.
All right. God willing.